Hello, my name is Heather Gross, and I do spend most of my days here at Pearson College, and one of the things I do when I'm here is I talk to students about what they're going to do next. And if only I had a tool that I could give each student that would say, here you go, just follow this recipe, everything's going to be all right. I don't. Sorry if you thought that's what today's TED Talk was going to be about. Instead, I have a framework. I want to share a framework that I think will be quite interesting, and it's going to relate to my own story. But before I tell my story, I want to make sure we're all clear on the one thing that has to do with me not having that tool, and that's uncertainty. Dr. Sam Collins, who's a leader in the UK, advises that we embrace uncertainty. Sometimes, some of the most beautiful chapters in our lives won't have a title until much later. And that's the story I'm going to tell you today as the chapter of my life I call the interfaith chapter. But before I tell that, I want to give you an insight into the toolbox or the frame I'm going to offer as well. And this frame comes from the world of design. This frame comes from the people who design greeting cards, the people who design microphones, the people who design airlines, and they all have in common a process of learning what people are looking for, coming up with ideas, brainstorming ideas, defining the problem, trying it out, and then getting feedback from other people. And that's the framework that I'm going to offer you as a way that each of us, can design our future. My story starts, though, here at Pearson College. I was 17, I was a Canadian, and I was interested at home in the religious experience, sort of writ large. When I came to Pearson College, because of the people that I met and my friends, because of the people I dated, because of the conversations in class, it became clear that the conversation for me was beyond my own religious tradition of Christianity, but it was really around connecting with people from other faiths and other religions. So I became involved in a weekly religion interfaith organization, and I did everything I could to talk to people about their experience to find out more. And that was an interesting part for me. But I knew that life went on, and I knew in the summer I needed a job. So May came, I still hadn't found a job, but the last meeting of this gathering happened, and the husband of the leader came to her and said, I just got funding for a student to hire for the summer, do you know anyone? And she said, well, try Heather, see if she has a job yet. I didn't, and I became the only staff person for the World Interfaith Education Association for the entire summer in between my years. I got to travel across Canada, that's part of Canada, talking with young people from different religious backgrounds, talking with Indigenous youth, seeing how they related to the conversation, and really getting a sense of what was going on in Canada around the interfaith conversation. I came back to Pearson College and tried to use those tools, leading retreats, encouraging other students to become engaged, figuring out how to branch this larger, how to make this bigger, and also how to make it deeper, how to make it part of my life. What were the pieces I wanted? When people ask me, what do you want to do when you leave, or what do you want to do when you grow up? I always said, I don't know what I want to do, but I know how I want to live. And I thought that how I wanted to live had something to do with community. I thought it had something to do with the forest. And I was pretty sure it had something to do with bringing people together from different places. So again, May came. Again, I didn't have a plan. But there was a notice board that notice that went up on the notice board. That's like getting an email now. And the notice said they were looking for volunteers in southern India to go and live in the forest. I sent a fax and got to go. And so there I found myself in the forest, living a very different life, connecting with people from very different places. And even though we were in a country where religion was part of everyday experience, it wasn't necessarily part of our community's experience. Still, I really appreciated the chance to get a sense of how this idea of people talking together from different places really made a difference in everyday life. But I got an invitation while I was in the forest in the Western Ghats, and I got this invitation to go celebrate Christmas. Seriously, someone sent me a letter saying, would you like to celebrate Christmas with me? And it was in a community in northern India where somebody from Pearson had been the year before, and they learned that I was in the country and invited me on a 2-day train journey to go north to celebrate Christmas. Well, I stayed for a few months in that community and was able to live in this interfaith community that was celebrating feast days from religions from all over the world. It's still there and still going very strong. They encourage people from different religions to come together, and the teacher there was a Sikh teacher, and so many of the people in the community are Sikh. So much of the daily practice is based on that tradition. That's where I really became grounded in the idea that interfaith could be a way of life, that interfaith could teach us things about how we live each of our lives every day. And that's also where I got the chance to try out new skills, things I didn't always do when I was here in Canada. One of them was we were having a festival and we needed a map. And this was not a time when you can go and print off a Google map. So I sketched something out on a piece of paper, and a woman saw it and said, I love your map. Are you an artist? And again, this was a time when I could try on different ideas. And so I said, well, I like to do that. Does that make me an artist? And she invited me to design the chapter headings for her textbook. She was writing a textbook on different religions, and I thought from a small publisher in India. So I worked with her and I designed these chapter headings for each chapter in her book, and then I ended up working on the pronunciation guide at the end of the book. And it turns out she was actually the major religious textbook writer for Prentice Hall, an international publisher. And I was able to come back to Canada when I went to university, and all the religion classes were using this textbook. And so that was exciting, and it meant I could talk to professors here in Canada, and I would go to classes and talk about who it was who wrote the book, the process of the book, and then also the experiences in that place. That led to future workshops and study on sacred places, and really became what I now look back on as my interfaith chapter. The thing that I didn't realize at the time was that I was using this design process. I was using this process of trying things out and creating ideas and developing them. The design I have here on the board is from the Stanford D School. There's lots of these though. Lots of people are getting excited about using some of the tools that have come from that area and using them in this context. So what I did first was I gathered a group of people around me. It was Pearson College. It was a chance to connect with other people. I also created the tools I needed to have empathy for what I needed in the world, but also what other people needed in the world. Next, I got the chance to really come up with a lot of ideas. So crossing the country and talking to young people gave me the chance to come up with lots of ideas, talk to many different people. It was the ultimate brainstorm of how interfaith dialogue could lead to peace and how it could happen in our own communities. After that, I was able to come back to Pearson College and really align with what the big ideas were. What was the big question that was facing us in the world today, and how could we really answer it? What was the big question that was facing me about how I wanted to live, and what experiences did I need to feel that out? And then the ultimate prototype, the chance to go and live in an interfaith environment, an interfaith community. Those of you who know me personally, and some of you in the room and on live stream do, I don't now live in an intentional interfaith community. However, many of those ideas that I've tested out in that time are ones that I hold true to now as well. And finally, the chance for feedback, which is very important in this design process of getting ideas from people on how that went. So feedback on my own life choices, but also being back at a university in Canada and getting feedback on that process and how that was relevant and how I could interact with it. I was surprised how much things changed for me. I was surprised how much, almost unintentionally, the kinds of things I wanted to do in the world changed because of my efforts to build a group of people around me, to come up with ideas, to connect with the big ideas, to try things out, and then to get some feedback on how that worked. That ended up being a recipe for a really wonderful designing of what happened. So this is what I leave you with. This framework, it's not a toolbox, but a framework of ways that you can think about the next parts of your life in whatever stage you're in, and designing the next chapter and designing a life. And also to remember that uncertainty is likely part of it, and that it is only in hindsight sometimes that we're able to name those chapters of our lives. Thank you very much.